Welcome from the deep. I am Mike the Finder.
And I am Book of Brett.
And today we're going to be talking about the 2016 film Lights Out, because we, on From the Deep, like to stay topical.
I don't know if movies are topical just because they were released 3 months ago.
Well, 6 years, 3 months. I think there's an in-between of topicality. That's a word.
Mm-hmm.
I just made that a word. Topicality.
You sure did.
Today, that's what we're going to be doing. Before we get into any of that, though, let me do some quick housekeeping here. If you're just watching this on YouTube, make sure you go check out your favorite podcast app where you can find all of the podcasts that we do here without our horrible-looking faces. Shut your fucking mouth.
Look at me, bitch. I'm beautiful.
Fuck. And if you're only listening to this on your favorite podcast app, make sure you go check us out on YouTube, because there is a lot of content over on YouTube that does not make it over to the RSS feed. And on YouTube, we're just youtube.com/@FromTheDeep.
It's still the dumbest thing.
Yeah, I agree. The handles, I don't, whatever. YouTube makes lots of decisions that we are totally happy with. We're happy. We're happy.
It's happy, right, sir? Yeah. He said it was happy.
We're happy with YouTube's decision making.
No, you can put the gun down. I said it. Thank you. Okay. All right.
Contract fulfilled. So, today we're going to be talking about Lights Out. This is something I had no idea that even existed in the world before last night. Brett chose...
And this was something... Yep. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Brett chose this movie after about an hour of deliberating about what we were going to watch.
No, after an hour of suggestion and declining, I finally found something.
Okay, to be fair,
that you would watch.
His initial pick for this was the first season of Honey Boo Boo. So,
right, and then my second one was The Meg.
No, your second one was the first season of The Kardashians.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah.
That's right. To be fair, I was only trying to get back at you for making me watch Dead Alive.
Oh, hey, if you haven't seen that video, I'll go ahead and link that up top right here, right now. To be fair, you know, I did make him watch Dead Alive, so that's fair.
Yeah,
so
you did.
Do you want to give us a synopsis of what Lights Out is about?
So, Lights Out is about a woman who is being terrorized by a friend who apparently died when she was in a mental hospital, and it is terrorizing her family, and they have to find a way to get rid of it. On that level, it sounds like pretty much any supernatural horror movie out there. And in a lot of ways, this has a lot of, it's very, very reminiscent of a lot of other horror movies out there. But at the same time, like I said, it's got a lot of practical effects that are really cool. Even the CGI, there's a couple scenes that are really cool. And I think there's actually a lot more to this movie than we see at face value. But before we get into that, I'll let Mike go over to the IMDb thing.
Yeah, that was more like a quick, mini review of the special effects and words.
Good. Well, then, if you enjoyed this episode, go ahead and give it a thumbs up. You can go ahead and subscribe.
So, as we usually do, let's go over to the podcast drive-in here and check out the IMDb facts for Lights Out. Lights Out from 2016. It's rated PG-13. Oh boy, it's always good news when a movie that is a horror movie has
I don't
PG-13.
think that.
It's an hour and 21.
That's fair.
It's an hour and 21 minutes. Thank fucking Christ. It has a 6.3 out of 10 on IMDb. This is directed by David F. Sandberg. It's written by Eric Hesserer. Hesserer, is that right?
Hesserer.
David S. Sandberg, and it stars Teresa Palmer, Gabriel Bateman, and Mario Bello. So, the one-sentence synopsis here since Brett did just a bang up job telling us what his synopsis was, I feel like maybe we should read this one. Rebecca must
This is what I come here for.
Rebecca must unlock the terror behind her little brother's experiences that once tested her sanity, bringing her face to face with a supernatural spirit attached to their mother. I can't believe I'm going to say this. Your synopsis was better.
Thank you. Thank you for that backhanded comment.
You're welcome.
It was barely a backhanded comment.
You're welcome. So as we usually do, what we're going to do here is we will talk about our overall thoughts, tell you if we think this movie is worth watching, and then we will get into specifics / spoilers, and then we will give our ratings and final thoughts after that. So why don't you go ahead and give me your initial thoughts of Lights Out?
So, as I said, this is something that back in 2016, I was actually pretty stoked to see. I did go see this in theaters, I believe. I think I did.
Oh, really? This had a theatrical release?
It's not that bad. Jesus Christ.
I didn't say it was bad. It was just surprising that it had a theatrical release because it looks like it was shot on an iPhone. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, so...
I'm being really negative today. I don't know.
Yeah, so this did get a theatrical release. At least I think it did. I feel like I remember going and seeing this in theaters because I remember the trailer being really interesting to me. And so to me, like even from the trailer, you could tell that this was going to be very lighting centric. Not just light centric because it's obviously called Lights Out. You can tell when you go and see the trailer what it's really about. But I could tell that they were going to utilize lighting as part of the horror, as part of the what makes the character who it is, and it was going to make it part of the scares too. This does have a lot more jump scares, speaking of scares, than I remember it having. However, a lot of them are pretty fucking creative, man. Like when the little kid, I can't remember his name, but when the son is going up to her room and it's got that kind of like frosted glass door to it, and then just the monster like pops up, and then as it recedes, it disappears because of the effect of the shadow interacting with the glass. And I thought like stuff like that was really, really cool, and it almost seems to kind of come out of the shadows that already exist in the glass there. So it's stuff like that I really, really liked about it because it's just really, it's a really creative way, but they do it so simply. Like the opening scene where like the way you can tell, if you know about lighting, you can tell the way they got these silhouettes to work. The eye lights that they have in complete darkness. If you go and watch the behind the scenes stuff, they'll tell you that they actually just put like reflective tape right there and then just had a really, really dim light so that in post they could bring the shadows down and all you really see is the reflection right there. So it's stuff like that we get a lot of really cool practical effects in this movie. There's also, like I said, I think there's a really big underlying message here about mental health, kind of in the kind of same thread as Hereditary. I wouldn't say that this is as good as Hereditary, but I do think that there is a lot to be said here, or I think it's trying to say a lot about mental health in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely agree with that. To me, his name's Martin, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
To me, this felt, I just recently watched Smile, and so for me, this was like, I don't know, it felt like Smile or It Follows or Hereditary is another good one. I feel like in another 2 or 3 years, we're going to have a monster movie for every single mental health disorder, and at what point does that become just overdone and stale?
This came out before Hereditary or Smile.
Well, yes. It did not come out before It Follows, but
no.
Either way, for me, this movie was actually pretty fun, and it's surprisingly like scary. Like there are
creepy.
There are moments, there are a lot of really creepy moments in this.
I'm really glad you liked it because this is a movie that I feel like not a lot of people have seen, and this is a movie that I've always really, really enjoyed. But I also, when we were talking, something about Annabelle Creation came up because he did Annabelle Creation, and the way you talked about Annabelle Creation, I was like, oh, I don't know if he's gonna like this or not.
Yeah, but I followed that up by, oh yeah, by the way, I've never seen Annabelle Creation.
Oh, that's right, you did. Okay, okay. In your defense, I did forget you said that. That's true. I'm also a big James Wan fan.
Right, and this was produced by James Wan.
Yeah,
so
that dude. I am a fan of almost everything that dude has done. To lesser or more degrees, depending on the project. But overall, I'm a big fan of the things that James Wan does. And I feel like the things he does always seem to feel reminiscent of the other things that, the other projects of the genres that they're in. But I feel like we always get some fun, creative spin from the things that he's involved with.
Yeah.
And I don't think Lights Out is much of an exception. I do think it's also worth noting, this is the director's debut. And up until then, he was really, really known for like no budget short films. And so to see, but I think this is also a really good indicator of what happens if you can make a good name for yourself with no budget. Look what happens when you give people like that money to work with.
Just to put kind of a, hang on, let me find this. Just to put into perspective what David F. Sandberg does in as far as short films go, here he is flipping the camera off for 4 hours straight. This is it. This is the entirety of this quote-unquote short film. This is also the same guy that has recently directed Shazam 2. What else has he done? But this is it. Like he doesn't blink. He doesn't move. He doesn't say anything. It's a loop.
It's a 15-second loop.
I think it's 50, but it's a loop. Yeah. And he just looped this. Oh, he just blinked. Okay, I'm wrong. But either way, this is the kind of stuff that I know him for. So, that's something. Also, I also did want to point.
Well, when your bar's that low going into it, of course you liked it.
I also wanted to point this out. This movie, why won't it show it? There it goes. This movie made $148 million off of a, what was it? I think it said 4.9 million. So, yeah, it grossed $67.3 million in the United States and Canada and $81.6 in other territories for a worldwide total of $148 million. Yes.
That is impressive.
Yes, it is. So
yeah. No, dude, like I said, dude, it's a good movie. You're pretty much what I've always run into when I talk to people about Lights Out. Brittany and I are pretty much the only two people I know, and I know 5 people who have actually seen. I know. 3 of them don't call.
Shocking.
But I do know, like I said, I don't know a lot of people that have seen this movie.
Well, I had never even heard of it when you brought it up. Like,
right.
Straight up, never even heard of it. So
I'm pretty sure I own this movie, or at least I used to.
Well,
I thought I did. I need to go buy it again. But yeah, I think there's a lot of creativity to it. It doesn't overstay its welcome. But I also want to say I'm also fully aware that this movie has some pretty big weaknesses to it. The dialogue feels clunky at times. The acting feels off at times.
The sister is terrible. She is such a bad actress.
And she's so unlikable.
Yeah.
She's just such an she's that angsty 20-something that didn't learn to stop being angsty and just kind of manage things in a quasi-healthy way. But at the same time, I really think that her character, if we take away the acting and we focus on the way the character is, I think it starts to make a lot more sense. And this goes back to what I was saying about the whole mental health aspect of it. As somebody who deals with bipolar and ADHD, as somebody who was brought up in an alcoholic environment, I really think that the way the sister is very reminiscent of what people that grew up in an environment like that end up being like in their late teens and early 20s. For me personally, it took until my 30s to really kind of get some of my mental shit together, and even then it's been like maybe 3% of it. And it's to me, I could really kind of sit there and go, okay, I hate the way the sister is, but as, you know, as her in the context of the film, I kind of do get it. And I do think even the mom, like the way the character is, we see a lot of that kind of same thing in her. That scene where it's just her and Martin, and she's like, you know, I think we just need a night, just us, and it goes into that movie night. That to me actually hit home, because it's this moment of lucidity that you'll see in people with severe mental illness. They do still have these moments of lucidity that don't last long, and this one doesn't last long until Diana is introduced into this scene. And so, like I said, I think it did do a really good job of kind of doing that elevated type of horror thing, and I gotta say, I did not pick up on that the first time I watched it. The first time I watched it, it was not me critiquing it, and this time critiquing it, I was able to get things out of it that I didn't the first time.
Well, I would like to read you my Letterboxd review. It's kind of lengthy, but I feel like this is probably the most succinct way for me to get out how I feel about this. As I usually do, I always title my reviews on Letterboxd, which, by the way, you can find both of our Letterboxd profiles linked down in the description down below this video. So the title for this is So Creepy Until It Isn't. The idea is great and really creepy until we find out who Diana is and, quote, how she got that way. Then this kind of falls apart. I think this starts answering questions way too early, and because of that, it started to feel a little too silly, which is really too bad, because before it starts answering every question that it brings up, it is an extremely scary premise. After recently seeing Smile and how it felt super similar to It Follows, I couldn't help but think about how similar this is to both those films. It's not quite as on the nose as those two, but the idea and subtext are very similar. Eventually, we're just going to have every single mental disorder represented as a scary monster, but at what point does it become a little too obvious? This movie is best when it's being subtle. But, unfortunately, subtlety is something it seems to steer away from as much as humanly possible. The less it answers, the better it is, but it's hell-bent on answering every fucking question as quickly as possible, and it just ruins any chance it has of being scary by the end. Diana is genuinely unsettling, and it's too bad she doesn't get a chance to carry the whole movie as much as she should be able to. I'd love to see more of this premise, but maybe handled in a much different way. I absolutely despise the ending, and it made me bring down the whole thing a whole point. I'm going to stop there because we're not going to talk spoilers yet. But I hated the ending. I hated it. And it's because I don't know if there's a way to talk about this without just straight up just going into this.
We might just do a spoiler alert.
Why don't you just tell me now, before we get into spoilers, your thoughts on this and whether you would suggest actually watching this?
I would and have suggested watching this to many, many people over the years.
Okay.
Like I said, I really, really enjoyed it. I'm interested to talk about the ending with you because I actually did not hate the ending.
Okay.
And we're gonna get into that. Did not love it, but did not hate it. But yes, I would recommend people go watch Lights Out. It is on Netflix right now.
Yep. That's where we both watched it.
It's definitely worth going and watching. Again, go into it with more of an open mind, and do remember that it is reminiscent of movies that came after it It's some that came before it, but you're gonna watch this and go, oh, it's like this, oh, it's like this, oh, it's like this. That's because that's what everybody's doing now. This came out at a time where not quite everybody was trying to do that just yet. But yeah, so I would definitely highly recommend people go watch this. It's got something to say, albeit, at this point in time, it's going to be a message that you've heard a lot. Keep in mind, though, this came out before a lot of those movies did. It's very creative in a lot of ways. It falls apart in certain parts, but let's be honest, there aren't very many movies out there that don't fall apart in one way or another at some point or another throughout the film. So, yes, definitely recommend it.
Yeah, so for me, I think this is definitely fun if you're into lighter horror. This is not something that is super dark. I said earlier, this is rated PG-13, so they really stay within a specific border of not pushing anything too far, really, which is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is something that I was sitting there waiting for it to happen. I did not know until today that this was rated PG-13. Had I known that, I think I would have gone into this with slightly different expectations. I think PG-13 and horror can work.
Wait, how did you not know that the rating pops up on the screen?
Because I didn't pay any attention to it. It's just not something I paid any attention to. But regardless, I think PG-13 and horror can work, but you have to do it in a way like this where it's more about how creepy it is and less about how gory and fucked up it is. And so if you're into stuff like that, especially the lighter side of horror, I think this is really strong. This is really good for people that are not hyper focused on horror movies as a genre all the time, always. This is more of I would consider this more like a date horror movie, if that makes any sense. This is, I for real. I'm not saying that as a put down. I'm saying that as there are different, and I said this in Dead Alive. There are what I consider, there's a ladder of horror, and depending on how fucked up that movie is, the higher on the ladder it is. And so I consider this lower on the rungs as far as horror goes, but that does not mean it's bad. I actually really did end up enjoying this, and I would suggest it if you're not super into gory, fucked up horror movies. This is lighter, but that's not a bad thing. So I want to talk about, from here on out, we're going to talk about spoilers, because I want to talk about the ending, because this is the biggest problem I have with this movie. So let me read the last couple sentences of my Letterboxd review here. I absolutely despise the ending. It made me bring it down a whole point. Having Sophie commit suicide makes the entire thing feel pointless and like she just gave up. I think they wanted me to feel like she was sacrificing herself for her children, but if Diana is a physical representation of Sophie's depression, then all she did was commit suicide, which means in the end, the depression won, which is a terrible ass ending. I think the director was trying to have his cake.
I didn't look at it that way.
I think the director is trying to have his cake and eat it too. That the ending of this is what the movie needed and not what the story needed. That's my fucking issue with this movie. The entire thing, you're telling me this is a representation of her depression, and then at the end, she fucking kills herself. That's, I don't see another way to look at it.
Yeah, well, yeah, I think most of the movie puts so much emphasis on it being about mental health that it's hard to have the ending be about Diana.
No, I don't think it should be about Diana, but I do want some closure from Sophie.
I'm saying that's what the ending is, though. The ending is about defeating Diana, not the depression.
As a movie, and he loses sight of his metaphor that he tries the entire movie to push. So, and that's what I mean when I say he's trying to have his cake and eat it too. He wants a good movie ending. He does not want an amazing ending to this metaphorical story that he's been trying to tell. And so that's where it all kind of fell apart for me, where I at the end I was just like, really? She's fucking killed herself? That's the ending? That's fucking terrible. Not to mention, CPS has already told the sister she's not fit to raise fucking what's-his-face. And so that kid's going into an orphanage. Horrible ending. Horrible.
Well, that's the thing. I don't know if I don't know too much about that, but I'm wondering if that since the only next of kin alive now is Rebecca, I wonder if Martin would go into Rebecca's care at that point.
I mean, if the CPS lady that went into her apartment and immediately made a fucking decision of like, this is not a person fit to raise a child because of the way she lives.
Yeah, he's at least going into foster care for a couple weeks.
For sure.
For at least a couple weeks until they can determine if she's a fit parent.
Yes.
Yeah, that's true. So it's just a super duper sad ending, and I will still say I don't despise it, but when you put it that way, it's a little bit. It's not as good,
right? I'm glad to hear you say. I'm glad to hear you say that. I would like to know how you.
It's like.
Go ahead.
It's like saying, you know what? Suicide is the answer.
Exactly. But I want to know how you felt about it before I said that.
I think it didn't have the impact that I think they wanted it to have on me as far as the emotional impact.
Right.
But it also, to me, I'm sitting here going, well, yeah, what else are you supposed to do? How else are you supposed to do?
Well, that's the problem is they write themselves into a corner with this whole thing.
Right.
And there's no other way to finish it without her doing that.
Because let's be honest, even if she did get a hold of her pills, it's going to be 3 to 4 weeks before they start having sex.
That's a really good point. Diana's like, no, don't take the pills. And it's like, it's fine. You have a huge buffer here of when she takes it to when it kicks in.
Yeah, for me, like I saw the pills drop on the floor and I'm like, okay, well, it's either Prozac or Lexapro. I know that for a fact. And it's, those don't happen right away.
Yeah. Well, I mean, everything else is really strong, other than the fact that they start answering the question about Diana 45 minutes in. That's the other issue that I had here.
Well, that's because that's halfway.
Exactly. That's a really good point, because it's an hour 20. But like, I feel like if you hold on to answering who Diana is, and you let that creepy silhouette thing really play out. And this is what I meant by I wish Diana had been given the opportunity to carry this movie even more, because the parts with her in it are fucking terrifying. The idea that she disappears when the lights come on and reappears closer to you when they go off, that's terrifying. That is genuinely scary. But I was just going to say, once you know it's a little 13-year-old girl that has a skin disorder, it's not as scary. Like, the moment I know who she is, where she came from,
puberty.
Yes, it's just not as scary. And so, like, halfway in, I know who she is. I know her motivation for doing so, and I have little to no reason to be scared of her anymore, because all of those answers have already been answered. Or all those questions have already been answered.
Right. I mean, I won't totally disagree with you there. That didn't really affect it for me. I think the way it affected it for you, because I was still having fun with it.
Right.
Because, like I said, this is not a groundbreaking, amazing, movie or anything like that. But it's a lot of fun. It's a ton of fun. It really is. And the thing with the whole hospital that got me was, I don't know who voiced the doctor, but whoever they got sounded like they were being given a favor, because it's just very like, oh no, this is happening. Oh no, put her down, strap her down. Why did you do this? Like he's a doctor, and on this recording, he's like almost interrogating her as if he were a cop.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here going like, okay, I don't know if this is just like, maybe this is just somebody, that with the Make-A-Wish Foundation. Maybe they got a Miracle Network kid and modulated his voice to sound like an adult. I don't know what happened with the doctor, but that really pulled me out. I feel like maybe it was like a Quentin Tarantino situation where the director insisted on being in it. And after a lot of arguing, like, Mr. Sanford, no, please don't. Please
and
don't.
He was just like,
you're so bad. So that did pull me out of it a little bit, but the whole hospital thing, I think at worst felt derivative for me. At best, got me through to the next part of the movie.
Right.
It didn't add a lot for me. It does make sense though why she met her at a mental health institute, because that tells me that this is something that didn't solidify until she was put into a place of seclusion where she had to kind of create this thing as a coping mechanism. So that all did make sense to me. The doctor was awful, and I don't even get to see his face, and it's like, dude, when it's that bad, like that's what auditions are for.
Well, I feel the same way about the sister. Every time the sister has dialogue, I'm just like, oh my God, you're so bad at delivering dialogue. Why did they give you this movie? I don't understand it. You're so terrible.
Like, what cum is that?
I don't get it. I don't understand. Was it a favor? Like, I genuinely
it was a budget
don't.
issue.
Maybe
it was a budget issue.
They had a lot of money, Brett. 4.9 million is actually not that much. Now that I think about it,
no, it's not that much at all.
But and I can look past the fact that there's nobody of like, you know, of a big name in this. That's fine. Right. But there are plenty of people who we don't know who they are that can actually act. And so I don't know, that the sister bothered me just a lot.
No, she's really bad. I mean, there's just something about her. I don't know. Like they were just like, we just need an attractive blonde. Like I don't know if that was it, because this is also, you know, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
Well, the people that wrote this, other than David F. Sandberg, who also directed it, was the same guy that wrote Arrival and Bird Box.
Oh, wow. Okay.
So the guy that wrote it knows what he's doing. He also wrote the Thing remake, that's a thing that exists. And the 2010...
That was one of my suggestions before we said on this.
And the 2010 screenplay for A Nightmare on Elm Street remake. So this guy has a lot of swings and some hits. So it doesn't surprise me that the dialogue...
Like a 300? It's a solid batting average.
Yeah, I mean, I guess. He also wrote Final Destination 5, so that's a thing. Okay, so... in that case, I don't have a whole lot more to say about this, so why don't you go ahead and give me your final thoughts and your rating on Lights Out from 2016.
So, my final thoughts about Lights Out, it is a fun, creepy as hell horror movie that is not going to satisfy gory fans. It is not going to be for somebody that's looking for something like super bloody gory or anything like that. However, it is creepy. It is creative. It is fun. It has some unlikable aspects as far as an entire protagonist. However, it also has a lot to say, like I said, about mental health, and probably about like depression in general, or in particular, I mean. You can stream it right now. I would recommend going and buying it so you don't have to watch it under terrible streaming circumstances.
Well, there's a lot of darkness in this movie, and when you watch it on Netflix, there's a ton of compression, and it is, if you notice that sort of thing, it will drive you crazy.
And I know you notice it. I see you out there.
Yeah.
I know some of you say you don't notice it. I know you notice it. Shut up. Definitely go check out 2016's Lights Out. I did say before, it does feel a little derivative of things we have seen already, but it's derivative of things that I think have come out more so after it came out. It does feel a little bit like The Ring, a little bit maybe like, what was that, The Grudge. However, I feel like it's got a lot more to say than those movies do. Mike says It Follows. I have not seen It Follows yet. I still not gotten around to watching that. It is on my list, though.
Smile.
However,
again,
I feel like the movies... What's that?
Smile is it also? That's the one it really reminded me of.
That's what I was leading into next. It also feels derivative of a lot of more recent movies, but you can't really hold that against it as saying it's derivative in a negative
I did
way.
also want to touch on this. Lights Out was a 3-minute short before it was a
Yes.
feature, which Smile was also, I think it was like a 4 or 5 minute short before it got made into a feature. So there are a lot of similarities between Lights Out and Smile. I happened to see Smile first, and so this reminded me of Smile. Had I seen this first, I would have been saying the polar opposite. So
yeah, exactly. So just keep that in mind going into it. But just because something's derivative doesn't mean it's bad when it takes those things and uses them in fun, creative ways, like Lights Out does. So I would say if I was going to give this a rating, I would give this a 7.5 out of 10. I really, really enjoyed this. This is not the first time I watched it. I enjoyed it all over again, and I was creeped out all over again too. And I think that is something it really, really, really deserves credit for, because it is one thing to see a hardcore horror movie and be unsettled all over again. It's not hard to do that when we're talking about gore, but when we're talking about a creepy factor that doesn't rely on violence and it still creeps you out on another watching, I think that's really, really commendable.
yeah, I agree. And you said you gave it what as far as your rating?
7.5 out of 10.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, for me, this is really strong up until the point where they just feel the incessant need to answer every goddamn question they bring up. I said earlier, I think if you hold off on answering some of those questions until closer to the end, much, much closer to the end, I think this would be way stronger. I also have huge issues with the metaphor he tries to set up throughout this whole movie, and then at the end, suicide is the answer to this creature. Again, like I said in my Letterboxd review, I think they wanted me to feel like she was sacrificing herself for the good of her kids. But how I actually ended up taking it was that, like Brett said earlier, suicide is the answer, which is a fucked up thing to say. And especially, I think when you're trying to write a movie that says something about depression and the protagonist that you have throughout the entire thing that is struggling with depression ends up putting a fucking gun to her temple and pulling the trigger, that's the wrong fucking message. And especially when the entire thing is about trying to evolve and overcome depression, and then the ending is you having them commit suicide. I think it's fucked up. I think it's the wrong message. I think it's a weak ending. I think that you wanted an ending for your movie and not an ending for your story, and that drove me fucking crazy, and it really ruined any of the creepy good things that I did have to say about this movie. This is strong up to a point, and it's creepy up to a point, but it tips really hard and goes all downhill once about 45 minutes in my opinion. They lose complete focus of what they're trying to say. The mom that is having all these issues by the end, I don't even feel bad for her. I kind of feel like you've left this fucking depression untreated and you've let this kind of happen throughout the entire fucking thing. And it's hard for me to feel sorry for somebody that doesn't want to take care of themselves. I understand how depression works. Trust me, I do. I really, really get it. And it is hard to take care of yourself. But I'm not a fucking character in a movie. Okay, I do not need to have
an example for others.
Exactly. I don't need to have Act 1, 2, and 3 wrap up my entire fucking story about depression. There is a reason that endings in movies are generally written the way they are, and I fucking hated the ending of this movie. It says all of the wrong things, and it just, I've heard murmurings of a Lights Out 2. And I think the director basically said that it's going to kind of depend on the brother and how old he is by the time they can actually get this movie made. I do think it's kind of a cool idea that because of all the bullshit that he went through as a kid, you could really lean into him having his own depression monster. I think that could be really, really cool. But if by the end of that movie, he fucking kills himself, I'm never watching another one of this guy's movies ever again. The fact
at that point, it's just lights out 2.
Yeah.
Do it.
So this is strong, but not nearly as strong as I was thinking it was going to be halfway through it. So I'm going to go ahead and rate this a 5 out of 10. This is not bad, but this is far from great. And I just think that there is a lot more that you could do with this idea, regardless of how sort of, I don't know, overdone it is at this point. And fair enough, this is one of the more early ones to take mental illness and turn it into a monster. And I guess we could talk about the Babadook. We could talk about all sorts of shit when it comes to this movie. And this may be one of the earlier ones to do it, sure, but watching it in 2023, I just don't. It's not nearly as impactful as it would have been had I watched this in 2016.
So, yeah, that's fair.
All right. So if you guys like this, make sure you hit the like button. If you really liked it, make sure you hit the subscribe button because we got a lot more content like this on this channel. We've been doing a ton of different stuff lately, and we've got some really cool shows coming up that we have planned. So if you liked what we're doing here, make sure you hit that subscribe button to stick around and see what we put out in the future. Thank you for getting to the end of this. If you did, we really appreciate it. And we will see you guys next time from the deep. Bye-bye.
Ta-ta.